Hello and welcome to Weekly Open. I'm Brian here with Cred and Don. Everybody's on the line today. We're excited to be back. There they are. But before we get to them, let me tell you about our partners over at FTX. Go to weeklyopen.com/FTX. You can trade there nice and easily, whether desktop or mobile app. Track your portfolio on the mobile app as well. You can even trade stocks on FTX if you've given up on this whole crypto thing. Thank you to FTX for being our partners. Once again, weeklyopen.com/FTX. Let's get to the show. Cred, Don, you're back from vacation. How you doing, man?
Very, very good. It's been nice getting away from the market and then coming back and having prices pretty much be the same. And then imagining how everyone has been coping for that month is just glorious. I like it.
Well, welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back.
Thank you.
And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Cred has shown his face since you last joined us. Cred, how are you?
Good. Yeah, feeling the Christmas spirit. Market's been very boring. It's that type of volatility where you refresh your trading view to make sure it's not frozen, and it isn't, which is depressing. Yeah, stuff's been very flat, but overall, can't complain. Spent some time with family, all that good stuff. So yeah, I'm sure we'll find something to talk about. Like we held the fort down pretty well, Ledger, while Don was away, in terms of like levels and directional stuff, entertainment. So I think it's his turn to pull some slack.
Yeah, Don, why don't you wow us with your prowess and knowledge?
Fuck.
Yeah.
I don't think there's much to wow with the charts like this, not gonna lie, but I can try.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Bitcoin's not doing us any favors, is it?
No.
Like it really is just the same old thing.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's right back where we started from, basically. I still remember like shitting the support level. Because it was the obvious place to buy, and then we bounced and we've retraced everything right back to that level, which honestly, like, I don't think is really good. Like, this shouldn't have like happened like this. I think if anything, like if the market was any strong, I think we should have held like this area here. The fact that we didn't, and I'm like now kind of like retesting at resistance, not really a good look. That said, it's still 20K, it's still previous cycles high, right? So it's still an area that I think is going to hold for a while. But this just tells me that there's not really that much to do in the market. You could argue that the first sign of strength would be like reclaiming this resistance. Until then, just makes sense to chill a little bit, at least on the Bitcoin front. ETH has been doing much, much better. Still looks okay to me. Bitcoin, just kind of trash, not going to lie.
If you didn't shill the 3AC gap meme so much, Don, I think it would have filled it. But the fact that you tried to go viral with it cost us everything.
The fact that it didn't go viral cost us everything.
Wow,
just shift the blame.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I tried. I did my part. Everyone else didn't. So is what
Let's
it is.
get to something important here, which is Bitcoin's obviously done nothing interesting. But we're 10 days? We maybe have one more show between now and the merge. So merge, bullish, bearish, neutral. What say you?
I would say, like, just looking at the chart, like it always, like when I look at the chart, right, and we have a narrative coming up and it's like just a few days out. It always depends on how we kind of go into it, right? Like if you have a narrative come in and the chart looks like this,
like EIP, sort of,
yeah,
right?
Then it's gonna like after or like right before the news hit, it's gonna do something like this almost always, right? But if you have a narrative come in and you've already done this part, right, then it's more likely, in my opinion, anyways, to like head higher or at least like be somewhat okay or shake it off. This instance, like we've had the pullback already. You could argue that that's like okay, everyone's positioned for the merge already. That's why we're pulling back. But for me, it kind of makes like I think it makes sense to be somewhat okay into the merge. So for me, I'm not going to change my ETH position. Wanted to sell into the news or like before the news, but given this price action, not really. Like I'm not in a rush.
I think CPI is going to be more important than the merge. Is that a hot take? Because aren't they on the same day?
Yeah, it's fairly hot.
That's my understanding is.
I don't like
So I really think that's in terms of the things that are going to have the bigger impact on the market, most likely. I think merge is up there. But we've seen a large part of that cyclical price action or narrative-driven price action play out. And also, I think like CPI is going to be in the driver's seat, but we'll use the merge as a way to cope, right? So like if CPI comes in and it's bullish for markets and ETH goes up because risk is going up, we'll say, well, look, the merge clearly wasn't priced in, number go up. And then if CPI is bearish and it's more aggressive tightening, whatever, and price goes down, then we'll use that to say, well, look, the merge is priced in and number goes down. I think there's a really high likelihood of kind of a fake false causation going into it, and that we ascribe merge stuff to what I think is much more likely to be fundamentally driven.
Well, yes. That's probably
look, I think when the merge stuff really started to pick up, I don't think we would have heard a thing about it if risk didn't have its kind of counter trend rally at that time. Like if risk kept puking and S&P kept making new lows and Nasdaq kept making new lows, etc., and kind of the Don magical monthly support levels didn't do shit, then we wouldn't really be speaking about the merge anywhere near as much as we are. It's because the merge was accompanied in a very timely fashion with all that positive price action and some relief across markets. I think that's what gave it sort of narrative stickiness. I think if it was just the case that we sort of puke through and whatever, then we wouldn't care about it as much fundamentally if its price impact was lower. I think we're sort of in a similar boat here, where we've got very important fundamental macro-y stuff coming up. And I don't think crypto is in a place where it will like secularly decouple from everything. It's probably still the same kind of large flows trade. And we just find crypto-specific narratives to attach to those larger market movements.
Yeah, I do think that day of, same week, whatever, that could totally be true. I think the merge, if it has the shock on supply that it's supposed to have, then that could start to have a greater impact over the coming weeks as you start getting the feedback of like, oh, well, this is how much ETH's being burned, every day or whatever. Kind of like what happened with 1559, except for you're also limiting the supply side. You're not just burning on the fee side. So even with lower fees, it should still have a nice impact on total ETH supply.
Yeah, I think people have like really weird time horizons for merge being bullish. Like it's an amazing catalyst for like next cycle, for example, right? Like, oh, look, it's switched to proof of stake and now it's far more environmentally friendly, allegedly, whatever. And it's much more ESG. And also the supply dynamics have been altered. And also now that we're in an uptrend, all the burn mechanisms are working over time, and it kind of sets it up nicely narratively. And also there's like staking and the natural kind of interest rate on the product, or you can yield farm, etc. I think those are really good kind of narratives that can pick up when the cycle is much more sort of conducive towards inflows, and it just makes ETH a much more attractive allocation once the larger flows are kind of on our side. I don't think it's like significant enough to break us from the ball and chain that is equity and that sort of big picture tightening, but maybe I'm wrong. I guess I'm just very cynical that I just pretty much still see this as like I mean, directionally, at least, I see it as a bigger picture macro trade. And I think if that starts to move properly, we're not going to be immune to it just because we moved to proof of stake, Yeah,
we're all kind of saying that ETH BTC is the trade, I guess, in that regard.
So it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I know Don loves this chart. He goes to sleep with it every night.
I mean, it just looks really, really good. So you gotta keep things close if you like him. And I mean, I really like this in general. Like if you just look at this chart, right, we've had this range here before like the breakdown basically, and we just re-entered that and kind of went sideways for a while, tested the top of the range, and then had a false breakout to the downside, which I mean it's usually like a really good indicator that it actually wants to head higher. We've had these a couple of times in crypto history on the higher time frames, because I mean this is a weekly chart, right? So weekly false breakdown that didn't do anything really. Bears tried really hard, couldn't manage to, and then it just completely reversed that move back into the range. And to me, this looks like it wants to at worst come like in this area and do the same thing that it's done on the bottom side of it, on the top side. So basically go sideways here and then dump. But at the best case, right, it's just going to go there and just run. And I feel like that's the more likely scenario. And then you have these highs to consider, and that's all-time high, right, which is kind of crazy. But I mean, it just looks really good to me.
At worst, number go up. At best, number go really up.
Yep,
I quite like
basically.
that framework. Don, I think it's a question to you, actually. Do you think ETH BTC could stay that constructive even if Bitcoin's 20K arse falls out?
No, I don't think so.
So it's somewhat conditional on either Bitcoin staying alive and or going up, right? Like if you get the 20K is the new 6K rug, do you think ETH will like overcorrect? That's sort of my view, because of how concentrated the trade is. I'm slightly even more cynical than that. I think the ETH merge trade is pretty much the only thing keeping crypto alive at the moment. That's sort of the only thing people seem to care about. Like no one's trading Bitcoin. Like the equities rally wasn't enough to make Bitcoin move any meaningful degree off of 20K. The merge thing, perps interest, options open interest, like it's all ETH. So I think if that unwinds, then I don't really see what's standing in the way of more downside, to be honest. But equities, risk, all that type of stuff as well. But in terms of like how the market is positioned, it pretty much seems like it's pretty much all ETH, and we don't care about anything else. And if something goes wrong, or if it unwinds, or if it's priced in, etc., I think it'll kind of overcorrect to the downside. Given that's typically what happens when you get such like tight concentrations of volume in a single trade. Like it's pretty much the only game in crypto right now, with some exceptions.
I do agree with you that it's the only trade that anyone's really taking, but I would say that in general, no one's really taking any trades. So it's like everyone that is in crypto is like trading the ETH merge. Like everyone that's still actively trading, but that's very little people. Like it used to be much more, and a lot of people are just sitting on the sidelines. So like it is a crowded trade relative to how many people there are trading right now, but I don't think it's a crowded trade in general. So my opinion is that Bitcoin is just gonna chill here at this level for like who knows how long. Like could be 3-4 weeks, and then either like be like a little bit of tiny range here, which I think would be pretty bad, and then come up or come down. And then, I mean, the ETH merge has played out already, right? If we're chilling in this range for 2 or 3 weeks, that's going to be the ETH merge done. So, yeah, I think Bitcoin isn't necessarily going to break down today or tomorrow or in this week. I'd be surprised if that happened. I'd be surprised if it happened before the ETH merge. And if anything goes wrong with the ETH merge, like you said, I think everything's going to shit, basically. Like that's also a possibility, right? I mean, it's just like that something goes wrong and we're all pretty much fucked. And I think that will lead to like having another leg on everything to the downside, on Bitcoin, on ETH, on all the other altcoins.
Bitcoin looks so bad to me that you saying it going sideways seems like very aggressive bullishness in my mind. It just looks so bad. Like in a vacuum.
It looks really bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then again,
just
like it's done
in participation. Sorry, don't go on. I'll do this after.
This has done it before, right? Where it looks really shit. This level was like really shit for so many months, right? I mean, this is legitimately 150 days of looking like shit. We're basically 10 days in of looking like shit. So
thank God it ended well, right?
Yeah. But so I think there's some time there. Like it looks really shit, but it did look shit before, and it took 150 days to play out regardless.
Yeah,
Ledger, I've got a fun thing to share real quick on the Bitcoin front. Actually, if I screen share this, there's been an uptick in participation or speculation, more accurately, in the Bitcoin contracts. You can see while this market has basically gone nowhere, you've got pretty steady uptrend in both kind of Bitcoin margined or coin margined open interest, as well as stablecoin margined open interest. Now, that's generally a characteristic throughout this consolidation. I mean, I'm not reading too much into this spot CVD, but for nuanced reasons I can't be asked to go over. But there are things here. One is just like, it just seems like participants are betting within this range for it to resolve one way or another. It doesn't seem particularly directional to me, and that's for two reasons. The first is that the derivatives CVDs, for the most part, seem to be like a bit flat and not skewed one way or another. And the second is the same with funding. It's been very flip-floppy. So, for example, if there were like a lot of bearish positioning within this range, you'd expect funding to either be negative, stay negative, or at least be skewed in that direction. With this entire consolidation, you've basically had open interest go up and funding basically flip-flop from positive, negative, positive, etc. It's not like skewed one way or another. And interestingly, I think the relative increase in ETH has been lower for the same period while Bitcoin has been ranging. So that there is some range gambling going on as this kind of, people say, oh, the big move coming soon. Well, you can kind of see it from market structure, microstructure point of view, because you have price moving sideways while open interest is skyrocketing. It's very likely that one side of that positioning, one side of the market is either going to be wrong or faked out and then right. But in any case, I think we'll see these, when volatility kicks in, we'll probably see some red bars across the open interest there. And I like to trade after those events because it gives me an insight as to like how vulnerable was a certain chunk of open interest, a specific price movement, and then how, is there any repositioning going on after the fact, and so on and so forth. But I guess this is just a very long-winded way of saying big week / big weeks, because, betting, September seasonality sucks. We've got merge coming up. We've got CPI coming up. So I don't expect this, as much as I'd love a range-bound scenario to stick around. I think at least in the short term, it probably gets violated soon based on how futures have been positioning and all the headline stuff we have coming up. Now, there is a world in which Don's sort of what ends up being a very optimistic 20K scenario comes to fruition. And that's, for example, if you get like a failed breakdown of this consolidation and then it reclaims, that would be a really good sign, for example. But for the time being, I just think we have so much kind of news-driven stuff sitting right above our heads, both crypto-specific and macro, that I think we'll see some candles at least try to poke above this in the near future. And, there's certainly enough participants betting on it for the move to be meaningful if we look at the open interest increase relative to what price has done, which is fuck all.
Yeah, that chart's so gross, man. That's all I can really...
It's appalling, isn't it?
Yeah. You're on an hourly there, and it's just... That's not a trade. That's just a walk,
Yeah, like, what are we doing here type of thing.
I mean, the best thing to do is go on vacation, I guess.
Well... So Don's not joining us next week. That's fresh.
If you do a weekly look through what happened in legacy markets, we've now had, that candle of a lack of willingness for higher really spoke, because then the next 2 weeks were just strong follow through to the downside, and the S&P is back in no man's land. None of this means anything to me I'm on the SPY ETF, but between 350, 400, none of it means anything, in my opinion, there. And I could imagine what you were talking about, Don, happening on a larger level with the S&P, just taking a lot of time, involving itself with those longer term moving averages, grinding along before it determines whether to nuke or not as well. More importantly,
I'm slightly more optimistic on that front.
Yeah, I was going to say we discussed a COPE weekly level on the S&P that might be relevant.
Yeah.
Have you got it up, Don?
Yeah, I do.
As in the chart, not anything else. I know your camera's off, but
that took me a minute to get.
Yeah, so I have like this weekly level, which is pretty decent in my eyes. I've in general, these levels have been really, really good, right? The S&P's been just trading technical. I discussed this monthly level, we bounced from it, ran all the way to next monthly resistance, got rejected there, right? And there was no monthly support, no nothing that kind of stopped the fall. So basically it's been down only since we hit that monthly resistance at 4.3K. But we finally kind of reached support for me anyway. So I could see this slow down or actually reverse again. And maybe we go up here, form another high, and then go lower. I don't know, but it seems like a pretty good area of support to me.
Yeah, it makes sense that it can be support. It's just none of it is particularly meaningful to me. Like, I don't feel like...
fuck your levels, Don. That's what he's saying. Take the hint.
No, I'm just saying, I feel like we could range for a long time, a wide range.
Yeah. I 100% agree with you there. I don't think this is going to be... You have the low of the move here, and it is the higher low, and we're gonna do something like this.
Yeah, do you think a higher high is a strong likelihood there? If it counts?
No, I don't think so. I think in general, this would probably be a range,
right? Yeah.
So I'm basically in the same camp as you. That I don't expect this to be a meaningful level, but it's a weekly level. It's really good support, so I think this could easily bounce from here.
Yeah, so it could be a near-term low from here rather than from lower or whatever. Yeah, that's fine. Doesn't hurt my feelings.
Ledger, do you have fresh Dixie FUD, by the way? How's the...
Yeah, I always do. I mean, it just keeps being the very relevant chart. Now, if you look at the weekly, it wasn't the strongest close to the week, but it was another green week, 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row. Or is this a new week? I guess
someone called Turn Vase to call the candles for us.
Yeah, so this is a new week, so this means nothing on a holiday like today. But the last 3 were very, very strong. You could make an argument from a momentum perspective. I don't care what oscillator, momentum, whatever you're looking at. That stuff can also go on for a very long time. But it's not like it did it with gusto, but it is making highs on a weekly level, and same on a monthly level. We closed the month of August extremely strong. Now it's September 5th. So looking at the monthly chart, there's nothing that stops this from going and tapping that 120 mark in my mind.
I would break a lot of things, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's the only thing, right? Like, I feel like if it got to that, you're just gonna have enough stuff break to where it's got to stop somewhere and retrace. It wouldn't surprise me though if it does it right now, based on what we just showed, that kind of relative exhaustion on lower time frames, or if it got all the way to here. So like, does it do this or does it do this? I don't really know. I don't even know that it matters, other than the fact that when it does taper off, it'll give us a buying opportunity in crypto again. But none of it would be considered weakness. It's just this massive breakout from a range that began in early 2015 here in this, so a 7-year range trade, and we're at levels that we hadn't seen in 20 years. So it's definitely significant in terms of what's happening there, and we're seeing. Let's see, when did that have a relative bottom? May 2021. So over a year of just a really, really strong uptrend. And, we looked at these as like a parabolic trade and breakdown, whatever, and it was vertical and it consolidated, but it immediately went back to the highs, So you got to redraw the parabolas now. And that's the problem.
The school of Trav, right?
Yeah, basically. So if you're trying to figure out like when does this settle down, and what does that look like? I don't know the answer to that. When it does, though, now we were talking about 100 to 103 being completely reasonable. Those now would actually indicate to me more of a broken, a more significantly broken trade. Like if it swept all the way down here, that'd be a little surprising looking at this full size trend. Now, like a retrace would only take you to 105, back to kind of this level of being tested again. So I don't know. Dixie looks really strong. More importantly, the euro is absolutely wrecked. Don, I would love some kind of update on what the heck is going on with your energy market over there.
Yeah. As Crypto Twitter's official ambassador to Germany, you always
please express to us what's going on.
I mean, I'm probably the worst person to ask because I spend most of my time not in Germany, but
and that is the problem.
I mean, it's actually kind of crazy because you're not allowed to heat your pools anymore. You're not allowed to do like a bunch of stuff. And a lot of houses, like the bigger houses, actually are already discussing like just putting the warm water at like specific times of the day, basically, not all day. So there's definitely like all of like the energy prices, the oil prices, and everything's definitely like we can start like seeing it have effect somewhere, I guess. But yeah, I'm not really the right person to ask. It's wild. I have no idea where it's gonna go. But then again, like for me, it makes no difference because I don't
flex
really
on
look
him.
at the prices. Yeah,
He said the quiet part out loud.
Sounds like I'm very wealthy. I don't need to be in Germany. I could get out of here with the love of my life and be just fine elsewhere.
Yeah, Don's solutions to Europeans listening are very helpful. Either get out of Germany on holiday, or if you're in Germany, be so rich that it doesn't matter what happens. Like this is a very grounded, well-connected man we're dealing with here.
I mean, what
A
am I
man of the
going to say?
people.
There's nothing I can say. There's no good solution, right? I can tell people to like not heat their apartment, but I mean that's not going to help anyone. So it's kind of like it's a shitty situation.
Don is like that Paris Hilton meme of just like stop being poor. that's his solution.
Have you considered?
Oh no, but yeah, I don't know where it's gonna go. I feel like it's like a lot of people are starting to speculate on it too, which is just recipe for kind of like wild moves both directions, because now people are like, okay, it's all gonna go like up, so I'm gonna buy futures or whatever, and I mean that's obviously at some point going to go wrong. It's just a question of when. But yeah, like just looking at the euro as well, it's just like, the fuck are you going to do with this thing?
Yeah. I mean, it does seem like if it got back to 103, 104, people would just go all in selling this, right?
It looks like it, yeah. Looks like a bearish retest at that point.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, right? Dollar had like a 7-year breakout basically, and euro just had a 7-year breakdown, you know? Yeah. On any time frame, this thing looks just absolutely insane. It looks like Alameda is farming it, you know? That's what that looks like.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, the thing is with the euro, right? So like, I'm not as pessimistic as a lot of other people are. That might be because I'm just not smart enough, but I don't think the euro is gonna crash, like crash in the sense of, okay, we're all fucked. Because that's kind of like the sentiment I'm getting from a lot of Americans, that like the Europeans are just completely fucked. It's not really what I'm thinking. But if there's any panic that breaks out, right? Like whenever you have a chart like this, right, you could see people just capitulate. There's a possibility for it, right, where people just freak the fuck out. And if that happens, I'm gonna be a buyer of euro. As stupid as that sounds. I mean, most of my investments, like especially like when you're trading Bitcoin, when you're trading ETH, that's all traded against USD, right? So it's pretty nice for me because I bought a bunch of ETH, I bought a bunch of Bitcoin, bought a bunch of Solana when the euro was much more expensive, basically. So I won on that front, but I'm not gonna be the guy that's just calling for doom. If there's a kind of opportunity, a big one, like if this drops big time, like to 0.9 or like 0.8 something, I would definitely be shifting dollars back into euro. But until that happens, like whenever you have this kind of weakness, right, you don't want to necessarily put yourself in a position to make shitty choices, right? Because if this goes to 0.8, what the fuck are you going to do if you bought one? It's really tough. But if you're in a position of strength, right, because I mean the dollar is strong and it's been trending really strong, and then you can make a decision on, okay, people, or like in general, this is not even people, it's like the whole countries are kind of positioned poorly, basically. Then you can take advantage of it, and that's what I'm going to try to do. But for me, it's not really like a trade there right now anyway.
It seems like an almost guaranteed Bitcoiner meme, right? Like Bitcoiners will be like, or people will say the dollar or the Bitcoin's making new lows relative to the dollar, and Bitcoiners will say, yeah, but look relative to the euro, no new lows relative to the euro.
Oh yes,
and then you go to 1 BTC equals 1 BTC, and that's when you know it's bad.
Yeah, have we not done that already?
I think we've done that.
We've been doing it for a while now.
Okay. Cred, are there any trades that you like?
The post-merge trade, I think, is going to be sick. Whatever volatility kicks in after CPI plus merge day, I think we'll see a large part of that open interest basically getting validated. And I always like trading after those kind of Fed speak newsy events, and those conditions have been really good. I even made a small tweet thread about like why you should trade after them and kind of what to expect, and those have been quite nice in terms of how they travel, and you know, being the counterparty to someone else's liquidation is always fun. As far as short term up until that point, I don't really see a ton. I mean, Bitcoin looks like it's getting delisted soon, right? It's just not doing anything whatsoever. Even on intraday timeframes, there's this like, what is it? A quadruple bottom, quintuple bottom. There's so many. It's just like, so, you know, that 19.5, 20K handle or whatever has so many of those lows there. I would be somewhat surprised if those don't get kind of probed at some point, just kind of see who's hanging out below them. The last time you and I had this discussion, Ledger, was actually, and I can screen share this bit real quick, unless I am already. Am I? No, I'm not. One sec.
Ledger needs to switch over.
No, it's all good. Share screen. Chrome tab. Okay, here we go. So the last time we had a similar discussion, Ledger, with regard to let's see who's hanging out below those equal lows, I think it was like here-ish, right? It was above 20K within this consolidation. And the idea was, you know, this looks pretty untapped. Maybe we get a poke and a spike at the midpoint of the daily range and see if there's any absorption there or willingness to buy. And it just completely puked through and even gave you a nice little retest before trading lower. I think at face value, the chart doesn't look too great because you basically have an impulsive move, consolidation, impulsive move, consolidation again. And within the context of where that's taking place, we've already traded a lot at the range high. The range midpoint at the moment is still resistance. And for me, the untapped area is still the bottom of the range, right? So kind of the inverse of Don's ETH BTC logic, where trying to break one side of the range, you go to the other. In that case, that was a failure to break support, took you to resistance. This looks like a failure to break resistance might take you to support. I think the thing slowing this down is really the 20K round number type of thing. I think there's a lot of options open interest kind of based around that price. And just in general, psychologically, people associate 20K BTC with being historically cheap, which makes total sense. But purely from like a trader's point of view in terms of levels, I think this daily range has been really kind and it's been really good at all the levels. So I think if I get a really kind of fast, illiquid, whatever news-driven spike, I wouldn't be averse to fading it around that daily mid-range, given that's resistance. And if it nukes, I think if you're going to knife catch it or buy some liquidations, the first reasonable area to do so is at the bottom of the daily range, or at the very least, once these lows kind of get wiped, and then you can see what the response is like. But it's very hard for me in good faith to like look at this chart, for example, and start spitting out trade ideas, right? And I think ETH is in like a similar boat. It's got a more specific catalyst, but in terms of its current price action, it's pretty much stuck within the same cluster ledger that you and I talked about, like it feels like weeks ago, right? Yeah. This sort of mini consolidation in 1500s, it was good enough to give us this sort of bearish retest into 1700, but the market's sort of been glued to it ever since, and it's sort of the underside of this range more generally. So there's not a whole lot to do there. I think the market's kind of starved for volatility. We've seen the open interest kind of tick up as the market is within this range. I think a lot of it will have to unwind one way or another, or there will be basically sloppy trading into volatility around merge time plus CPI time. And that to me is a much better environment for opportunities than looking at this thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. The crap part is, right, that at least to me, Bitcoin looks like it wants to break down and ETH looks like it wants to break up. And then what the fuck do you do? Because it cannot, like, both cannot be true. It's very, very unlikely that that ETH goes up, even if, like, when Bitcoin actually breaks a range, that's pretty much almost unheard of. So you have the situation where you have two kind of like leading, like ETH and Bitcoin both are leading the market. And when they're disagreeing with each other like this, it's really hard to take a trade.
Doesn't it excite you, though, the potential for all the people who've been screaming from the top of their lungs that ETH is ultrasound money? Like, just what if they just end up right?
I mean, I'd love it. I have more ETH than I have
Bitcoin. Enjoyable. Bitcoiners have always been right, and about the like Bitcoin dominance trade eventually coming back, and for that, if that trade just completely goes away, I think it would be very entertaining. Now, it'd probably have its day again, but I just think it'd be really entertaining to see ETH. I mean, you start trying to talk about what do those levels look like. What if ETH ends up at 2K and Bitcoin is like 10K? I don't know, just making up a number.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's fantasy land. I think for the time being, it's fantasy land. I think if we're going to get any type of big restructuring in terms of like what's sound money or what's going to be crypto native collateral or how are people going to denominate their crypto net worth, I think that has to happen either at like complete extremity of a cycle, in this case, like when, you know, some sort of type of wipeout event, or it has to be peak bull. Yeah, when the thing is trending and you can get this whole new pool of money and see how they allocate and what they prefer, that's sort of plenty catalyst there. I think this sort of mid-late cycle-ish, especially in the downtrend, it's really hard to like reorganize the tenets of crypto. I just don't think it's the right place for it. But I think you and I discussed, Ledger, there are a lot of like Bitcoin narratives that are strained now in terms of, you know, it's big. One of its main arguments was the now professional institutional holder base who hold it as like an inflation hedge or as an uncorrelated asset, whatever. And like they're all the ones who are left, the ones who didn't sell are all underwater. The inflation hedge thing is underwater. Plan B, stock to flow, like underwater. You know, narratively, there's certainly some difficulty, especially even for the kind of ESG energy crowd. If ETH seamlessly transitions to proof of stake and works, and I think Bitcoin stays proof of work, which I think it should, still for new entrants to the market or the ESG analysts, whatever, you know, Bitcoin ends up being this tired, financially underperforming, returns-wise sort of ocean boiling chain, and then ETH is your internet money, crypto, DeFi, NFTs, yield farming, etc. I think that maybe sets something up for a further, like a structural shift in crypto towards ETH rather than BTC. But I still think that requires more evidence for the time being. I think intuitively it makes sense to me. And also a lot of Bitcoin is just very cringe, at least the mainstream type of culture that we see on crypto Twitter, which again is not indicative necessarily, but all the whole, you know, your 15th Austrian economics lecture and sound money, meat, steak diet, like, I don't know, the cult elements that we're exposed to in our little niche. I can certainly understand why people are looking elsewhere.
0.2 ETH requires a lot of restructuring. What doesn't is 2K, 20K, right? Like that's basically straightforward at this point. The breakout to 0.1, and that is a soft restructuring. You know, 0.1 BTC is very high. It looks very normal on that ETH BTC chart that I think Don still has up. Looks very normal on each USD chart. It just, I don't see Bitcoin's narratives. I see ETH's narratives. From a price action perspective, it lines up. It just looks like Bitcoin's going to continue to show weakness to me on a relative basis.
And that caps the market's overall upside, I think, overall.
Yeah, I mean, totally.
The interesting part to me, right, and this is something that like people would, like the Bitcoiners would kind of just cry as, okay, it's just way smaller, whatever. Like ETH's way smaller than Bitcoin. But the interesting part is that ETH's been outperforming since basically 2015, right? So like you have like these big moves. And I think this doesn't really scare you, right? If you're like a Bitcoin holder, long-term holder, this doesn't scare you, right? These are just like old season pumps, whatever. What really scares you, or should scare you anyway, is this long-term outperformance, which we've kind of had since 2019. This is like still not going parabolic, right? This is just like a proper, like you have like a trend, then you have like an expansion, then you have sideways, and the parabola of sorts that you've used to have, or like this very, very crazy move to the upside, hasn't even happened, and we're almost at all-time high again. So I think that should scare Bitcoin holders. I think there's like a good narrative there, and in general, like this just looks pretty good to me. I don't know what it means for crypto when like ETH just goes completely crazy against Bitcoin, but I mean, I'd love to see it. I don't. The thing is, right? Whenever I buy Bitcoin, I'm like, okay, what do I do with it? I put it on like in cold storage and put it away. And when I buy ETH, I'm like, okay, I bought a bunch of ETH. Let's have some fun with it, right? And you can buy NFTs, or you can try something new in the DeFi space, even though that's kind of fallen out of favor, obviously. But there's stuff to do with it, and there really isn't with Bitcoin. And I mean, I've said on multiple kind of instances that I'm not really the kind of guy to like gold, right? And I think that's the best narrative Bitcoin has, right? Being better than gold. Well, ETH can do things. Very obvious, because I mean, people are doing things. It's kind of shitty, right? And fees, like when you're trading NFTs, the fees that you pay, it's just stupid, right? But still, like people are doing something with ETH, and they're not really doing it with Bitcoin. Which, I mean, all of those things, like if I was like not a trader, but like a long-term investor or whatever, would make me think. And I mean, maybe that's just the way forward. I don't know. I don't really care. Like for me, it's just a trade. But I think there's a lot of things to look at in this relationship. And I mean, it's been going up nonstop since 2015. So like I'd start wondering if I'm actually right in the Bitcoin camp or not.
Thankfully, you don't have to pick, right? You can just buy both and
Yeah,
rebalance and do stuff. I think people forget that a lot of the time.
Yeah. I think from my personal point of view, and it's not like I'm so, I'm not an ETH maxi or anything like that, but I'm looking at the way the narratives stack up on one side of the page and the other side of the page, and it's much clearer for ETH. All the things you just said. So if Bitcoin's stuck in the gold route, then it's capital preservation in certain markets, but that's the trade, not the long-term investment. Whereas ETH does make more sense to me as the long-term investment, where sometimes I de-risk the ETH side of things because of the capital preservation, gold narrative, whatever, as if Bitcoin has those moments. And, some Bitcoiners might say, well, yeah, you point at that with, ETH BTC. That happens sometimes when a coin is newer or whatever. Like if you look at Sol ETH or, try to say like, what are the ones that you'll just say, well, some other thing will take over that one. They're not really doing that either. Like Solana looks quite bad relative to Ethereum. Ethereum's kind of in its own land in terms of doing this stuff. And I don't know. I don't see the great Bitcoin narrative currently. The chart looks bad. The narrative is really bad. The populist pushback against mining and stuff is not great. Ethereum has more answers to some of the problems of a blockchain. And the main strike against Ethereum is, I guess, the changeability, right? The governance of being always wishy-washy to the market participants' desires versus Bitcoin is just known straight ahead kind of policy of how it changes over time. And ETH, you could say, well, the ETH godheads or whatever can go change everything whenever they want. So it can't be a store of value. And we're not really seeing that play out in the market.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, honestly, like for me, there's still a lot of arguments to be made about like actually having something decentralized, like you said, because I mean, at the end of the day, like all of this only really like all of these cryptos only matter because they're supposed to be decentralized, right? Otherwise, there's better centralized infrastructure than blockchains, obviously, because blockchains are kind of slow and expensive to run. So like that argument still has to be made. But yeah, it doesn't really matter to me because I'm just like in this to make money basically. And if the narrative aligns with my trade, I'm going to be happy for it and just take the trade.
Yeah. The chat's saying I'm marking the top of ETH BTC. Maybe so. That's fine. I don't know. I'm kind of in your camp as well, Don. I'm like, I don't have any kind of like strong affiliation that I have to be one way or the other. It just, one seems like a difficult trade where I'm trying to force it, and one seems more natural to me.
Yeah, pretty much the same for me. Like, I mean, there's a reason why, like when I went on vacation, I was comfortable with holding the ETH that I have and not like the Solana, for example. And yeah, because whenever you have a narrative like this in crypto, it's usually pretty strong and it's going to at least keep your head above water. Unless you obviously just jump into the narrative once actually everyone has caught up to it. But I don't know, like this 3 months of like barely upside, don't really think that narrative has to have played out completely just yet.
Anything else you want to talk about?
Just need Bitcoin to like hang on at least, right? Like for a lot of these ideas or rotations or for ETH merge price action to be positive, whatever, like you need this thing to hang on. It's insane that we live in a world, at least in the short term, where like 20K looks like resistance, at least intraday. That's so crazy to me. It's like, what are we doing? And I also think in terms of sort of stuff for the week ahead, obviously that's next week after that actually, but like Don's weekly level for BTC USD I think is really good and really important. I'm like screen sharing my thing right now. I've got the daily range as you can see, but like you can see it pierces right through the middle of that same weekly cluster that he's got. So if you're looking for like intra-week bias, whatever it may be, that's sort of the spot for it. At the same time, I remain uncomfortable with the idea of all this quadruple, quintuple bottom staying in. And I think when the price was at like 8 something K after the 6K bottom, it kind of left in a bunch of lows and started trending. I don't think this is the type of environment. I really think if we get something sufficiently news driven or legacy puke, whatever it may be, we get to explore what's below all those lows. So in terms of like trading levels, or at least bias levels, I sort of think 20.6 to 21K as intra-week resistance. And that's very depressing for me to say, but it's kind of structurally the case. And in terms of what's below us, I think if you're going to be looking for people puking and getting some good entries based on that, just see what's below this quadruple bottom that we formed. If it ends up being like the breakdown that we had the last time we spoke about that type of structure, where it's just like a straight nuke with no absorption at the level whatsoever, that's fine. If you get something a bit more spiky or something where that delta gets soaked up, maybe there's a more constructive range trade to be had. But like I'm not naive, I'm not an idiot. Like bigger picture on the weekly and stuff, this just looks very tired to me, and it didn't participate in any of the upside when equities melted faces. Now the equities are at support, it's kind of not doing anything, and even within this range, it's kind of below resistance at the moment. I think to have any constructive crypto narratives, rotations, inflows, whatever you want it, like for crypto to stay good and tradable to a large extent, if you want to do better than kind of asynchronous news-driven pumps, you need this thing not to look like a total piece of shit. And at the moment, there isn't a ton of evidence of demand at 20K. Which sucks, but that's kind of my assessment for the time being. But also bear in mind, I can change my view based on like one candlestick, so maybe don't take it too seriously.
Don, how you feeling?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly how I feel as well. Like Bitcoin wise, I mean, if you want to take, like if you're not positioned right now and you don't want to be buying support, because let's be real, this kind of looks shit. You can make a momentum trade off of this level. Anything beyond that, I have no real idea about. Like I'm still constructive about the ETH trade, as I've talked about today at length. Still think that has quite a bit of upside left. I think like the 2K high that we set doesn't have to be the high. I think there's a good chance that we even go towards like 2.7. Just like you have a low here, you make a higher low somewhere in this area from where we are to like 1.3K ish. Like let's say this goes down, I think that'd be like a pretty good road towards like 2.7K ish into the merge or after the merge. Just kind of looks like, when I look at this chart, that's where this looks like it wants to go. And then, but like I said earlier, the weird thing is that Bitcoin, like this looks like it wants to go lower. Bitcoin, ETH looks like it wants to go higher, and then you kind of have to make rough choices. So the easy trade, if you want to be trading Bitcoin, is just waiting for it to reclaim the level, 20.78, like this area. If it does, both ETH and Bitcoin are on the same page, and then it's easier to take the trade. It's very comfy. If it doesn't, then it's just kind of like a matter of time. Like, and ETH kind of like, I think is in the driving seat at this point, which is kind of stupid. So yeah, I know, like fresh trades, I don't know. I don't like it. Old trades, like I'm keeping my ETH trade. I don't have like too much other altcoins. Like I said, I sold my Solana. Still have a little bit of Bitcoin. Have a good bit of ETH and have a few NFTs, but that's about it. And the NFT thing hasn't really gone too well for me anyway.
They will come back.
They will come back. I mean, the big ones, and this is like always like the thing, like the big NFTs that you buy, right? So like Bored Ape Yacht Club, for example, hasn't really moved at all. So that's just been going up. Like I bought it and it's been going up with ETH. But the smaller ones, like anything below like 10 ETH per piece, just been kind of going to shit. Like across the board, it's basically down like 10, 20, 30%. Which kind of cancels out the gains ETH's made, which, I mean, it's whatever. Like NFTs for me are to have fun, so I don't really mind. But yeah, everything that isn't ETH hasn't doing too well, and I usually try to stick with the winners at least for a while. So ETH's still the trade for me.
Yeah, I would like to make more money quickly, but the market doesn't seem to be favoring us for that. So we're just going to have to be patient instead. I feel like the best way to lose money, though, would be to assume that you'll be able to make more money more quickly.
Yeah.
And the market environment doesn't really support that narrative. So I guess we'll just leave it there and come back next week, that much closer to the merge, find out. I feel like we should have some kind of measurement for like a price for ETH BTC at the time of merge. I feel like that would be a nice time to actually tag that kind of 0.1 type of zone. That would be fun.
Wouldn't it be predictably cruel if that were the top of like everything?
Yeah,
it's like merge, ETH BTC top tick, market top tick, and then every we all die. That would be like so scenic. It's like looking back at those CME futures and all that kind of
obvious.
In hindsight, it's like, oh, you should have known type of thing. That's not my prediction. I'm just saying it'll be very crypto and very memey for that to play out that way.
Yeah, for sure. We'll see if it's true. In the meantime, we thank you for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you all being here. And we will certainly look forward to seeing you again soon. Remember, you can follow us at weeklyopen.com. You can actually also check out old episodes, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And also check out our partners over at FTX, weeklyopen.com/FTX. You go to that link. We appreciate it. You can trade on FTX with 0 fees. You can even trade stocks and stuff these days. You can do all kinds of things on FTX and the FTX app. Weekly Open